pleased to welcome Doug Steinhardt, chairman of the Republican State Committee. Good to see you, Doug.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are the Republicans doing in New Jersey?
We're doing great. My parents had an old saying that good things in life don't just happen. They take ideas and initiative and a little bit of hard work. And above that, kind of the courage to get yourself off the sideline and put yourself in the game and make things happen. And I think for the 2 years that I've been chairman of the state party, we've been making things happen.
We should also make it clear that Mr. Steinhardt is considering a run for the governorship of the great state of New Jersey. We'll be following that. Our colleagues at NJTV News are doing that on a regular basis. Let's do this. What is your biggest concern about Governor Murphy's policies in this state? We're actually doing this program on the day that he's delivering his budget address. Go ahead.
Yes, Steve, I challenge you to walk down any street in New Jersey and not find a family who hasn't been adversely impacted by the governor's policies. Find me a family that doesn't have a child who can't afford to start a life here, or parents or grandparents who can't afford to retire here. I think the governor's policies are tearing apart New Jersey's families, and they're killing New Jersey's jobs. And I'll tell you where that resonated with me the most. About a year ago this month, my daughter was spending 6 months studying overseas in London. She was studying abroad. And I come from a real small Warren County family. My parents live on the same farm that my sister and I grew up on. We still live in the same neighborhood. We still have Sunday dinners together. And for 6 months, the only way I could communicate with my daughter was on my cell phone. And more New Jersey families, unfortunately, are going through that same dilemma. We lead the nation in the out-migration of businesses and people. More jobs and more residents are leaving New Jersey.
You put that on Governor Murphy?
Yeah, I do. There are more
people. It started with Governor Murphy?
For the last 2 years, the United Van Line study made clear that New Jersey leads the nation in the out-migration of residents. And frankly, I don't want to be one of those parents or grandparents that's got to visit his kids or grandkids on his cell phone because they can't afford to buy a house here or find a job here or start a life here. And I think that's worth fighting for.
I'm going to assume that you're against the millionaire's tax?
Look, the millionaire's tax is just another income tax, and I think New Jersey voters are a lot more sophisticated than that. They understand that every income tax, every tax that comes out of Trenton ultimately comes from the roost in the pockets of the state's middle class.
You know, it's interesting, the New Jersey GOP, the Republicans in the state, I believe at a recent, I'm not sure, it was a summit you had down in Atlantic City. You passed some policies around creating a healthier, safer workplace environment for women, correct?
We did.
Talk about that.
Sure. I think at some point, I think the governor needs to look in the mirror and ask, when does the blame come to rest with him? The fact of the matter is that toxic work environments and workplace harassment have plagued him, and as long as he's been in a leadership role, they go back to his time as the ambassador in Germany, to his Sky Blue football club, his campaign, now his administration. I think it's a complete failure of leadership on the governor's part. So, when the issue of non-disclosures crept up.
Non-disclosure agreements?
Non-disclosure agreements in the political place. I'm against non-disclosure agreements that would prevent or preclude workers in a campaign, and particularly women in a campaign, from being able to come forward, or in an administration, from being able to come forward, or in a company, from being able to come forward and discuss the workplace issues that shouldn't otherwise be protected anyway.
It's interesting. You mentioned, Mr. Steinhardt, looking in the mirror. I appreciate your candor and your directness about your sense of the governor. You're a big supporter of Donald Trump.
I've been a supporter of the president's. I haven't hidden that.
Okay, nothing to hide. I'm just asking that. You were there in the rally that he had down in South Jersey for, I believe, the former Democratic congressman, now Republican congressman, Jeff Van Drew, right?
I sure was. I actually had an opportunity to open earlier in the evening.
Got it.
For the president.
So in an effort to create a healthier workplace environment, to fight against sexual harassment of women, if not worse, sexual assault, the president, not anyone's opinion, it's in the record, has accused women of having fat, ugly faces, repelling voters with their looks, because of their looks, called one woman a crazed, crying lowlife, another woman a dog. He called Carly Fiorina in the presidential race, we all saw it. Who would look at that face? Why would anyone vote for that? Can't imagine it. Called Stormy Daniels, who is in fact a woman that most people know. Adult film actress called her horse face. The list goes on. Not to mention the non-disclosure agreements, not to mention the out-of-court settlements, and a whole range of other arrangements having to do with President Trump and the multiple charges against him from a variety of women, sexual harassment and worse. So here's a question. You made it very clear about how you feel about Governor Murphy. What are your thoughts about my description of the president and his responsibility here?
Sure. Steve, look, the only mirror I'm able to look into every morning is my own. And my parents raised me to believe that how you treat other people and how hard you work are the two qualities in life that you control, that control where in life
speak in this way. That's
that
not
you go. So what do you mean?
No. That language I just mentioned.
Well, which is exactly what I was going to say.
You have no history of that.
And nor have I ever. And that's my point. I get to set the tone at State Party. And I think we've done that. And I intend to live by that and make sure that the folks that work with us live by it as well. That's the venue that I control.
Does it bother you?
Does what bother me?
The language I just described. Those descriptions I described.
Again, what I can say to you is that, I set my standard, and I like to think that the standard I set is one that my folks would be proud of. And that's what motivates me to go out and do what I do every day, to do something that I think that my folks would be proud of, that my kids would be proud of, and that hopefully that the folks that pay attention to what I do in New Jersey will be proud of too.
Last question on this. These descriptions, and we don't have time to go into others. Do you think the president is helping the public discourse around important public policy issues, or through the name calling and the things I described here hurting it?
Look, my focus on what the president's been doing are the things that, in my opinion, are kind of helping move.
You separate policy from rhetoric?
I do. My focus on what's coming out of Washington is that, the American economy is booming. And I think that, that has masked a lot of the failures that have gone on here within the state of New Jersey. I think that, our focus as a state party going forward is keeping New Jersey's families together, putting New Jersey's families first, focus on the state's unaffordability crisis, and making decisions that prop up the middle class instead of overtax them.
So it's interesting. I mean, the time we have left, staying on policy, staying on issues. If the question of the millionaire's tax, you say off the table, you're not the only one who says that, right? Where would New Jersey get the revenue to support New Jersey Transit, to support pre-K programs, universal pre-K, et cetera, et cetera? Where would we get those revenues?
Well, look, I think you have to start in a bunch of places. It's like anything else. You got to, open up the hood, roll up your sleeves, and get to work. And I think for a long time, the state legislature has failed to do that. I think we've had, governors and legislatures back and forth who fought over power and not policy.
Both parties?
Both parties. But I think there are a bunch of places to start. If you have a chance to look at it, I think you start with public pensions. It's a multifaceted question, but I think you start by moving employees out of defined benefit plans and moving them into defined contribution plans. We got to talk about getting public employees off of the platinum health care to the gold health care that most of us have to live in the private sector.
Is it too generous?
Is it too generous?
The current plan.
The current plan is, I don't know if it's too generous, it's just unrealistic. It's unaffordable. Look, the state needs to live within its means, just like you and I have to make decisions every day in our families. We have to choose what we can do and what we can't do within the resources that we have available to us. The state of New Jersey has been living above its means for far too long, and it simply can't afford to sustain that practice anymore.
If you choose to run for governor, I look forward to continued conversations with you on the substance, on the issues that matter most to people. And thank you very much for joining us.
I appreciate your time, Steve. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you to Doug Steinhardt. I'm Steve Adubato. I'll be right back right after this.
Think Tank with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by Gibbons PC, Hackensack Meridian Health, Seton Hall University, the New Jersey Education Association, Wells Fargo, NJM Insurance Group, International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, Choose New Jersey, IBEW Local 102, and by these public-spirited organizations, individuals, and associations committed to informing New Jersey citizens about the important issues facing the Garden State, and by Employers Association of New Jersey. Promotional support provided by Insider NJ, and by ROI NJ.